"I want at least 5 children," she said, and shattered the rancher's loneliness backslash. It was the kind of place where the horizon seemed endless, where the sky could change color in a moment, and where the wind whispered through the fields with a voice of its own. The ranch had been in his family for generations, and though Jacob had inherited it, he often wondered if he had inherited more than just the land. He had inherited a life of solitude too. Each morning, long before the sun rose, Jacob would wake to the sound of the rooster crowing somewhere near the barn. His routine was always the same. He would put on his worn boots, pull on a faded flannel shirt, and head out to check the livestock. The cattle would lift their heads as he approached, recognizing the rhythm of his steps. There was comfort in the routine, yes, but it could not fill the emptiness that gnawed at him in the quiet hours. Jacob's days were long and physically exhausting. Mending fences, feeding animals, and ensuring the water troughs were full took up much of his time. Some days, he would ride out to the far fields, the horses' hooves thudding softly against the earth, and he would feel a strange mix of freedom and isolation. The land stretched endlessly around him, but no matter how far he went, the emptiness remained. He sometimes laughed at himself, thinking he should be grateful for the peace and beauty around him, but a part of him ached for something more. Evenings were the hardest. After a long day of work, Jacob would sit on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the hills. The sky would turn shades of orange, pink, and purple, and for a few moments, the beauty of it all would make him forget his loneliness. Then the stars would come out, one by one, and the silence would return, heavier than before. Nights on the ranch were quiet, sometimes too quiet. The occasional owl hoot or the distant bark of a dog did little to fill the void. Jacob's only companions were his thoughts, and they often wandered to places that made him feel both comforted and sad. Memories of family gatherings long gone, friends who had moved to cities, and dreams that had quietly slipped away with the passing years. Jacob had friends in town, people he had known since childhood, but visits were rare. Life in the countryside required constant attention, and the small town nearby was over an hour's drive away. When he did make the trip, he would enjoy the warmth of a conversation, the smell of freshly baked bread from the local bakery, or the laughter of children playing in the streets. Yet when he returned home, the loneliness felt sharper, as if the brief taste of life beyond the ranch reminded him of what was missing. He sometimes wondered if he had always been this solitary, or if life had quietly shaped him this way. He had dated women in his younger years, but nothing had ever lasted. The long hours, the demanding work, and his quiet, introspective nature seemed to push people away. He remembered one woman in particular, Anna, whose laughter had filled his small cabin with warmth for a few months. But eventually, she had left, seeking a life with more excitement, more social connection than a ranch could provide. Jacob had understood, of course, though it had left him with a deeper sense of emptiness. Over time, he had learned to keep his heart guarded, to focus on the land and the animals, and to accept the quiet as his companion. Despite his solitude, Jacob was not unhappy in the conventional sense. He took pride in the work he did. The land, with its rolling fields and grazing cattle, was alive in a way the town never was. He knew every hill, every stream, every patch of wildflowers. The ranch had its rhythms, its challenges, and its rewards. Yet in the quiet moments when the chores were done and the sun had set, a part of him longed for warmth that the ranch could never provide. Someone to share stories with, someone to laugh with, someone to call family. Jacob sometimes tried to imagine what it would be like to have a family of his own. He pictured a house filled with voices, children running barefoot across the porch, and the smell of home-cooked meals drifting through the air. The thought both excited and frightened him. He had never been sure he could take on such responsibility, and he often doubted whether anyone could ever want to share such a lonely life. But still, the dream persisted, quietly nestled in a corner of his heart, waiting for someone to awaken it. Life on the ranch demanded resilience. Winters were harsh, with snow piling high against the barn doors and winds cutting through the thin walls of his cabin. Summers were long and hot, with endless chores and the constant vigilance required to keep the livestock healthy. Jacob found strength in the routine, but it also isolated him further. He could speak of the land with passion, recounting stories of generations past and the battles against nature that had shaped his family's legacy. Yet when the day was done and the work was complete, the house felt emptier than ever. In his rare moments of reflection, Jacob would sometimes talk to himself, a habit born out of long hours alone. He would discuss plans, recount stories from his childhood, or even question his choices. The animals were patient listeners, though they could not answer back. A dog might wag its tail or a cow might nudge him with its nose, but the conversations he longed for, the ones filled with laughter, debate, and love, remained absent. Jacob's loneliness was not bitter, but it was persistent. It was a quiet ache that no amount of work or beauty could erase. He had learned to live with it, to accept it as part of life on the ranch. Yet deep down, he yearned for something more, something that could fill the nights with warmth and the days with shared purpose. He had resigned himself to the idea that perhaps he would live and die in this solitude, surrounded by cattle and fields, never knowing the joy of family life. And then, as if by fate, a change was about to enter his world. A change that would challenge the walls he had built around his heart, that would awaken dreams he thought had died, and that would shatter the quiet of his lonely life with a force as powerful as the wind across the plains. It was the kind of change he could never have expected, arriving quietly at first, a voice, a smile, a spark of energy that seemed to belong to a different world. Jacob would soon meet someone who was not content with quiet or empty fields, someone whose dreams were larger than the land itself, and someone who would see in him not just the rancher, but the man yearning for love and family. Jacob did not know it yet, but his life of solitude was on the brink of transformation. The ranch, once a symbol of isolation, would soon echo with laughter, conversation, and the chaos of life shared with someone brave enough to step into it. And it all began with a simple meeting, a spark that would grow into something neither of them could have predicted, a journey toward family, love, and a happiness Jacob had almost forgotten existed. Jacob had grown used to the quiet rhythm of his ranch, to the familiar sounds of animals moving through the fields and the wind brushing against the tall grass. Yet one ordinary morning something, or rather someone, arrived that would change everything. Her name was Clara. She was unlike anyone Jacob had ever met. She came to town on a small wagon, carrying a few bundles and a determined smile that seemed to shine even in the harsh light of the sun. She was here to buy supplies, she said, though there was an energy about her that suggested she was seeking something more than just groceries or tools. She had a presence that demanded attention, not in a loud or overbearing way, but in the kind of quiet confidence that made people notice her the moment she entered a room. Jacob first saw her when she stopped at his ranch to purchase hay for her small livestock. He had been repairing a fence, sweat on his brow, when he looked up to see a young woman approaching, her boots dusty, her hands carrying a wicker basket full of coins and goods. She looked around at the ranch with curiosity, her eyes wide and bright, taking in the sprawling fields, the grazing cattle, and the simple cabin that had been his home for years. "Hello," she said, smiling warmly. "I was told you might have some hay to sell." Jacob nodded, adjusting his hat. He wasn't used to strangers visiting the ranch, especially not someone like her. "That's right. How much do you need?" he asked, his voice careful but polite. Clara's eyes sparkled. "Enough for a small flock." "I've got some goats and chickens, and they're a hungry bunch." She laughed, a sound so full of life that Jacob felt a strange warmth he hadn't felt in years. It was light and natural, not forced, and it made him forget for a moment the long hours, the solitude, and the endless work that usually filled his days. As they spoke, Jacob noticed something remarkable. Clara wasn't just friendly. She was genuinely interested in the ranch, in the land, in the life he had built for himself. She asked questions, not the polite, small-talk questions, but real questions about the work, the seasons, the animals, and the challenges he faced. She listened with intent, nodding at the right moments, her eyes full of curiosity and understanding. "I've always wanted to live in a place like this," Clara said, looking out over the fields. "There's something honest about the land, about working with your hands, about knowing that the sun rises and sets on your own hard work. Most people don't understand that anymore." Jacob, surprised by her insight, felt a connection forming, fragile but undeniable. He nodded slowly, realizing that this stranger somehow understood what he had spent a lifetime trying to convey to no one. "It's not an easy life," he said, "but there's a kind of peace in it too, if you know how to appreciate it." Clara laughed again, shaking her head. "Oh, I know how to appreciate it. I've grown up on a farm too, not this big, but I know the work, the sweat, the endless chores. And yet," she paused, looking around, "there's something about your place, something different. Maybe it's the quiet, maybe it's just you." Jacob felt his cheeks warm slightly. He wasn't used to compliments, especially ones that seemed so personal. He cleared his throat and handed her the hay he had set aside. "Here," he said, "that should last your flock for a few weeks." Clara took the bundle with both hands, smiling as she did. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "I think I might enjoy living out here for a while. There's freedom, isn't there? And the chance to start fresh." Jacob nodded again, unsure why he felt an unfamiliar tug at his chest. There was something about Clara, her energy, her spirit, that stirred something in him he hadn't felt in a very long time. The quiet ache of his loneliness seemed to pulse a little less sharply, replaced by curiosity, anticipation, and a quiet hope. Over the next few days, Clara returned to the ranch more than once, often under the pretext of buying more supplies, but each visit seemed to stretch longer than necessary. She would linger, helping Jacob with small chores, asking questions about the land, and sharing stories of her own childhood. She spoke of her family, of the siblings she had grown up with, and of the dreams she carried in her heart. Jacob listened, sometimes quietly, sometimes speaking, and always feeling a strange, warming sense of connection that he had not experienced in years. One afternoon, as they sat under the shade of an old oak tree, Clara's eyes met his with an intensity that made him uneasy and exhilarated at the same time. "Jacob," she said softly, "I have a dream. I hope you won't think me bold, but I have to say it." Jacob's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't sure if he was ready for bold declarations from anyone, let alone a woman who had appeared in his life like a burst of sunlight. "What is it?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Clara's smile widened. "I want a large family. At least 5 children. I want a house full of life, laughter, and chaos. I want to share everything with someone I love, someone who is brave enough to dream with me. Do you think that's too much to ask?" Jacob blinked. For a moment, he wasn't sure he had heard her correctly. 5 children. His first instinct was panic, a mix of fear and disbelief. How could anyone expect that? How could he even imagine managing such a life? And yet, there was something about the way she said it, with such conviction, such joy, that made him pause. He had spent so many years alone, convinced that love and family were distant dreams. Yet here was Clara, full of life, full of ambition, and unafraid to say exactly what she wanted. She was fearless in a way that challenged everything Jacob had believed about himself and his life. That's well," Jacob stammered, unsure how to respond. He had never encountered anyone like her, someone so sure of her dreams and willing to speak them aloud. "It's a lot," he said finally, managing a small laugh. Clara's eyes twinkled. "Yes, it is a lot, but don't you think life should be full of a little chaos, a little adventure? Don't you want more than just quiet fields and empty nights?" Jacob was silent for a moment. The truth was, he had always wanted more, though he had buried the desire under years of routine, work, and solitude. Clara had a way of speaking that bypassed his defenses, reaching straight to the part of him that had longed for love, family, and connection. As the sun began to set, painting the fields in gold and pink, Jacob realized something remarkable. For the first time in years, he felt hope, not just a fleeting thought, but a warm, persistent hope that maybe, just maybe, his life could change. The loneliness that had defined him for so long felt less permanent, less insurmountable. With Clara, anything seemed possible, even the impossible dream of a house full of children. Over the following weeks, their bond deepened. Clara continued to visit the ranch, each time bringing energy, stories, and laughter. She helped with chores not because she had to, but because she wanted to be part of the life Jacob had built. She encouraged him to open up, to talk about his past, his fears, and his dreams. Slowly, Jacob began to share pieces of himself that he had kept hidden for years. He spoke of the women he had loved and lost, of the quiet ache of his loneliness, and of the longing he had carried for a family of his own. Clara listened, never judging, always encouraging. She laughed with him, teased him gently, and sometimes challenged him to think beyond the boundaries he had set for himself. And in turn, Jacob began to see her not just as a visitor or a guest, but as someone who could truly be part of his life, a partner, a friend, and perhaps even the family he had dreamed of but never thought possible. By the end of this part of their story, something had shifted. Jacob's once predictable, solitary life was now filled with anticipation, curiosity, and the spark of something new. Clara had not only arrived at his ranch, she had arrived in his heart. Her bold dream of at least 5 children, her fearless spirit, and her warmth had begun to shatter the walls of loneliness that had surrounded him for so long. Jacob didn't yet know what the future would hold, whether their dreams would align perfectly, or whether life would challenge them in ways they could not imagine. But he did know this. For the first time in years, he felt alive in a way he had forgotten was possible. And all of it had started with a simple meeting, a woman who dared to speak her mind, and a dream that seemed larger than life itself. After those first meetings, Jacob and Clara began to see more of each other, not just as neighbors or acquaintances, but as 2 people whose lives were slowly intertwining. What started as brief visits to the ranch grew into longer afternoons spent talking, working together, and exploring the land. Each day, Jacob found himself looking forward to Clara's presence, though he would never have admitted it aloud at first. Clara had a way of moving through life that was impossible to ignore. She approached every task with energy and determination. Whether she was helping mend fences, feed the animals, or simply carry water for the garden, she did it with a sense of joy that made the work seem lighter. Jacob noticed how the cattle seemed to respond to her calm confidence, how even the stubborn horse in the barn would soften when she approached. He found himself smiling more often, laughing at her jokes, and feeling a warmth in his chest that had long been absent. One afternoon, as the sun poured golden light over the fields, Clara suggested they take a break and walk along the ridge that overlooked the valley. Jacob agreed, and together they wandered along the tall grass, the wind ruffling their hair. They spoke of many things, childhood memories, dreams, and even fears they rarely admitted to anyone else. Clara told stories of her siblings, of the adventures they had on their small family farm, and of the nights she would stay awake imagining the life she wanted to live. "You know," Clara said as she kicked a small stone down the path, "I've always believed that life should be full of stories. Every day something should happen that makes your heart race, that makes you feel alive. Otherwise, what's the point?" Jacob listened quietly, feeling a connection deepen. For so many years he had believed his life on the ranch was enough. He had the work, the land, the animals, But Clara was showing him something different. She was reminding him that life could be more than survival and routine. It could be full of laughter, love, and the unexpected joy that comes from sharing it with someone else. As the weeks passed, their bond grew stronger. Jacob found himself opening up to Clara in ways he hadn't with anyone else. He told her about the loneliness that had weighed on him for years, about the women he had loved and lost, and about the quiet ache of wanting a family of his own. Clara listened, never judging, never interrupting, simply offering her presence and understanding. She shared her own hopes and dreams, painting a vivid picture of the family she longed for, of the laughter of children filling a house, and the warmth that comes from shared meals and simple moments together. One day, as they were repairing a section of fence that had been damaged by a recent storm, Clara looked at him with a seriousness that made his heart skip a beat. "Jacob, I know life on the ranch isn't easy," she said, her voice steady. "But I see in you a man who is capable of love, of family, of building something extraordinary. I want to share that with you. I want to build that life with you." Jacob paused, hammer in hand, unsure how to respond. He had spent so long guarding his heart, believing that he was destined for solitude. And yet, here was Clara, fearless and certain, offering him a chance to dream again. He felt fear, yes, the fear of change, of responsibility, of failing. But beneath it was something stronger, hope. Over time, their relationship developed in small, meaningful ways. They shared meals on the porch, cooking together and laughing when things went wrong. They would stay up late, talking under the stars about everything from the simple beauty of a sunset to the possibility of a future filled with children and shared dreams. Jacob began to realize that he no longer felt complete alone. Clara had become a vital part of his life, someone whose presence brought him joy he had forgotten existed. There were moments of gentle teasing as well. Clara had a mischievous sense of humor, often challenging Jacob's quiet, careful nature. She would suggest ideas that seemed outrageous at first, planting a new orchard, adopting more animals, or even throwing a small party in the barn for the local children. Jacob would initially resist, but then he would watch her eyes sparkle with excitement, and he would find himself agreeing, laughing at her boldness, and discovering a side of life he hadn't known existed. Their courtship was not without its challenges. Jacob struggled to balance his growing feelings for Clara with the responsibilities of the ranch. He sometimes worried that he wasn't enough for her, that his quiet life could never match her energy and dreams. Clara, on the other hand, was patient but persistent. She encouraged him, challenged him, and reminded him that love was not about perfection but about partnership, trust, and shared dreams. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky with streaks of orange and pink, Clara took Jacob's hand and led him to the edge of the pasture. "Jacob," she said softly, "I want to know that we can face life together. That we can be brave enough to take risks, to love fully, and to create the family we've both dreamed of." Jacob looked into her eyes, seeing a determination and warmth that moved him deeply. He realized that his fear of loneliness, his fear of failure, and even his fear of love itself were fading in the face of her courage. He squeezed her hand, feeling a quiet but powerful certainty rising within him. "Clara," he said, "I want that too. I've spent so long alone, but I see now that I don't have to be. I want to share my life with you." From that moment, their relationship took on a new depth. They began to make plans for a future together, talking openly about the house, the land, and the children Clara dreamed of having. Jacob felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness, but mostly he felt alive. For the first time in years, he looked forward to each day not just as a day of work on the ranch, but as a day he could spend building a life with someone he loved. They faced small adventures and shared quiet moments alike. On weekends, they would ride horses together, exploring the hills and valleys beyond the ranch. They would pick wildflowers in the fields, bringing color and life to the small cabin. Jacob taught Clara the practical skills of ranch life, and she taught him to laugh more freely, to dream more boldly, and to embrace the unpredictability of life. Through it all, Clara's vision of a family of 5 children remained a constant, shining light. Jacob had moments of doubt, wondering if he could really provide such a life, if he was ready for such responsibility. But Clara's unwavering belief in their future gave him strength. He began to see that love was not just a feeling but a choice, a commitment to face life together, to nurture and support one another, and to create something lasting. By the end of this part of their story, Jacob and Clara had become inseparable. Their love was not perfect, but it was real, full of laughter, challenges, dreams, and a deep emotional bond that neither had expected to find. Jacob's once quiet and lonely life had begun to transform into one filled with hope, joy, and the promise of family. Clara's boldness and vision had opened his heart, teaching him that happiness could be found not just in solitude and routine, but in connection, love, and the courage to dream together. Jacob realized something profound. Life was richer and more meaningful when shared with someone who dared to see the best in him and who challenged him to grow. Clara had shattered the walls around his heart, showing him that love was not just possible. It was worth every risk, every fear, and every effort. And together, they were beginning the journey toward the life they both imagined, a life full of laughter, children, and the warmth of a family built on love and trust. After months of growing closeness, Jacob and Clara decided to take the next step. Their bond had deepened into something undeniable, a love that had grown through shared work, laughter, and long talks beneath the wide-open skies of the ranch. It was clear to both of them that life apart was no longer imaginable. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped low and bathed the fields in golden light, Jacob asked Clara to marry him. She said yes with a radiant smile, and for the first time in years, Jacob felt a complete sense of hope and belonging. The wedding was small and simple, held in the town's modest chapel with just a handful of neighbors and a few friends. It was perfect in its simplicity because it reflected the essence of their lives, genuine, honest, and full of love. Clara wore a white dress that shimmered softly in the sunlight, and Jacob couldn't take his eyes off her. The ceremony was brief, but every word felt significant. When they exchanged vows, it was more than just a promise. It was a declaration that they were ready to face life together, come what may. After the wedding, they returned to the ranch, now ready to create a life that would be as full and rich as Clara had always imagined. The cabin, once quiet and lonely, began to feel alive with new energy. Together, they planned their days, divided the chores, and nurtured the land with renewed purpose. Clara's presence brought warmth and laughter into every corner of the home, and Jacob found himself smiling more than he had in years. Even the animals seemed to respond to the change, as though they recognized that the ranch had grown fuller, happier, and more vibrant. Soon, Clara's dream of a family began to take shape. The news of their first child filled the cabin with excitement and anticipation. Jacob, though nervous, was determined to be the best father he could be. Clara's energy and optimism were contagious, helping him imagine a life that he had only dared to dream about in quiet moments. They decorated a small room for the baby, painting the walls soft pastel colors and placing handmade toys on the shelves. Jacob often found himself staring at the tiny crib, marveling at how quickly life could change. The arrival of their first child was a mixture of chaos and joy. The nights were long and exhausting, with cries echoing through the cabin and endless diaper changes. Yet, amidst the sleepless hours, there was a profound sense of fulfillment. Jacob found a depth of love he had never known, a love that went beyond anything he had imagined. Clara, radiant and determined, guided him through the challenges, encouraging him, laughing with him, and reminding him that this was only the beginning. As the months passed, their family grew. One child became 2, then 3, and eventually 4. Each child brought new challenges and unique joys. There were moments of frustration, of spilled milk, of toys scattered across the floor, but there were also moments of pure delight. Laughter ringing through the house, small hands holding theirs tightly, and tiny voices calling out for attention. The ranch, once a symbol of solitude, had transformed into a place alive, with the sound of children's laughter and the bustle of everyday family life. Jacob discovered that fatherhood brought unexpected lessons. He learned patience, resilience, and the beauty of small, ordinary moments. He watched as his children explored the fields, chased chickens, and discovered the wonders of nature that he had long taken for granted. Clara, ever the dreamer and planner, continued to encourage him to embrace the chaos and find joy in every detail. Together, they created routines that balanced work, play, and learning, ensuring that their children grew up with love, guidance, and a strong connection to the land. Life on the ranch was not without its struggles. There were seasons when the weather tested them, storms that damaged fences and threatened crops, and days when illness or fatigue made even simple tasks difficult. Yet, through every challenge, Jacob and Clara faced life as a team. They supported one another, shared responsibilities, and reminded each other of the dreams that had brought them together. Their love and partnership became the foundation of the household, a constant reassurance for the children and a guiding light through the difficulties. Despite the hard work and occasional exhaustion, Jacob found joy in the small moments. He watched his children chase each other through the fields, laughed as they tried to help with chores, and marveled at the way Clara's eyes lit up whenever one of their children achieved a new milestone. The ranch, which had once been a place of solitude, had become a sanctuary of family life, a place where love was visible in every corner, from the worn barn to the bustling kitchen. Clara's dream of having at least 5 children became a reality with the birth of their 5th child. The house was now a whirlwind of activity, with tiny feet running across the floors, laughter echoing through the rooms, and the constant hum of family life. Jacob, though often exhausted, felt a profound sense of pride and fulfillment. He realized that the love he had once thought impossible had not only arrived but had multiplied, filling the ranch with warmth, joy, and purpose. Through it all, Jacob and Clara never lost sight of their bond. They made time for each other, sharing quiet moments in the evenings after the children had gone to bed. They would sit on the porch, hands intertwined, talking about the day's events, their dreams for the future, and the simple beauty of the life they had created. Their love, strengthened by shared challenges and triumphs, became a model for their children, showing them what partnership, trust, and dedication could achieve. The ranch itself seemed to flourish alongside the family. Crops grew stronger, the livestock thrived, and the land felt more alive than ever. Jacob found that the work he had once done in solitude now had deeper meaning. Every fence mended, every field tended, and every chore completed was part of a larger purpose, providing for a family, nurturing their growth, and ensuring that the ranch remained a home, not just a property. Clara's energy and optimism continued to inspire Jacob. She encouraged him to take risks, to try new methods in farming, and to embrace creativity in every aspect of life. Together, they explored new ideas for the ranch, experimented with crops, and even hosted small gatherings for neighbors and friends. The house was no longer a quiet, lonely cabin. It was a center of life, community, and connection. Jacob often reflected on how much his life had changed. Just a few years earlier, he had been a lonely man, resigned to solitude and the quiet rhythms of ranch life. Now he was surrounded by the sound of children's laughter, the warmth of a loving partner, and the satisfaction of creating a life filled with meaning and joy. Clara's bold dream, once daunting and impossible, had reshaped his world entirely. As the family grew and the years passed, Jacob and Clara faced challenges together: financial worries, the occasional illness, and the inevitable trials of raising children. But their love never wavered. Each challenge was met with teamwork, patience, and a shared commitment to their family. Their children grew up knowing they were loved, valued, and supported, learning the importance of hard work, kindness, and resilience from the example set by their parents. By the end of this part of the story, Jacob and Clara had created a life that was rich, fulfilling, and full of love. The ranch, once a symbol of loneliness, had become a home of warmth and joy. Their children, 5 strong and vibrant souls, brought energy, laughter, and meaning to every corner of the land. Jacob realized that happiness was not just about peace and solitude. It was about connection, love, and building a life with someone who shared your dreams. He often looked at Clara, her eyes shining with the same determination and warmth that had first drawn him in, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had shattered the loneliness that had defined his life for so long, and in doing so, had given him a family, a home, and a purpose greater than anything he had imagined. Together, they had turned the ranch into a place where dreams came to life, where love was tangible in every laugh, every meal, and every moment shared. Jacob understood, finally, that life's true rewards were not measured in wealth, land, or accomplishments alone, but in the people who filled your days with love, joy, and meaning. And with Clara by his side and their children filling the house with life, he knew he had found exactly that: the life he had longed for, the love he had yearned for, and the family that had once seemed impossible but now felt inevitable. Years had passed since Jacob first met Clara on the ranch. The once quiet and lonely land was now alive with activity. Children's laughter echoed through the fields, and the sounds of daily family life, the clatter of dishes, the soft hum of a lullaby, the patter of tiny feet, had replaced the long, empty silences that Jacob had once taken for granted. Looking back, he could hardly recognize the man he had been, a man who had resigned himself to solitude and the endless work of the ranch. Jacob and Clara had weathered many seasons together, and their love had grown stronger with each passing year. The challenges of ranch life had not disappeared. There were storms that damaged fences, illnesses that brought worry, and moments when exhaustion made even the smallest tasks feel impossible. Yet each obstacle had been met with patience, teamwork, and a shared commitment to their family. Together, they had learned that life's greatest rewards often came through effort, resilience, and the courage to face the unknown hand in hand. Their children, now growing older, brought joy and lessons every single day. The oldest was responsible and thoughtful, often helping with chores without being asked. The middle children were full of energy and curiosity, asking endless questions about the world, exploring the fields, and filling the ranch with wonder. The youngest, still a toddler, brought chaos in equal measure to laughter, tipping over baskets of laundry, spilling milk, and babbling happily from room to room. Each child, unique in temperament and personality, added richness to the household, and Jacob often marveled at how full life had become. Clara, as always, was the heart of the family. Her dreams had not diminished with time, they had only grown stronger. She encouraged her children to explore, to dream, and to approach life with curiosity and courage. She and Jacob worked as a team, balancing discipline with encouragement, structure with play, and work with celebration. Even on the most exhausting days, Clara's energy and warmth filled the house with hope and laughter. Jacob himself had changed in ways he had never expected. He was no longer the solitary, cautious man who had once feared love and family. Fatherhood had taught him patience, empathy, and the true meaning of responsibility. He had learned to listen, to guide, and to celebrate even the smallest achievements. Watching his children grow, he saw in them both the reflection of their parents' love and the limitless potential of the next generation. One quiet evening, as the sun set behind the distant hills and bathed the fields in golden light, Jacob sat on the porch with Clara. The children were playing nearby, chasing each other across the grass, their laughter carrying on the breeze. For a moment, the world seemed to pause, and Jacob felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. He looked at Clara, her face illuminated by the soft light, and realized how profoundly she had changed his life. "You know," he said quietly, "I never thought I'd have a life like this. I never imagined, any of this." Clara smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "I knew it was possible," she said gently. "I just needed someone brave enough to dream it with me." Jacob chuckled softly. "I was too cautious for a long time. I didn't think I could handle it or even deserve it. But you showed me that love is bigger than fear. That family isn't about perfection. It's about courage, trust, and being there for each other." Clara nodded. "Exactly, and look at what we've built. It's not always easy, but it's ours, every bit of it." Jacob looked around the ranch, at the children playing, at the animals moving calmly through the fields, and at the home that had once been silent and lonely. He realized that happiness was not a distant dream or a fleeting feeling. It was built every day in every choice, every act of love, and every moment shared. The ranch, which had once symbolized isolation, now represented life, warmth, and connection. As the years continued, the family faced new challenges. Some children struggled with schoolwork, others tested the boundaries of their parents' patience, and unexpected problems arose on the ranch that required long hours and careful attention. Yet Jacob and Clara approached each difficulty as a team. They learned to compromise, to encourage each other, and to maintain a vision of the life they wanted to create. Each challenge strengthened their bond and reinforced the lessons they were teaching their children. That life is unpredictable, but love and perseverance make it manageable. The children grew into thoughtful, capable individuals, each contributing in their own way to the household and the ranch. They learned from Jacob the value of hard work, from Clara the importance of dreams and curiosity, and from both the strength of family and the joy of shared experiences. The ranch became more than just a home. It was a place of learning, laughter, and memories that would carry through generations. Jacob often found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. He thought about the long, lonely days before Clara had arrived, the nights spent staring at the stars wishing for something he didn't even know how to name. He remembered the first time he saw Clara, her eyes bright, her energy fearless, and her dream of a large family. At the time, it had seemed impossible, even overwhelming. And yet, that impossible dream had become his reality, a life richer and fuller than he had ever imagined. He realized that Clara had not just changed his life, she had expanded it. She had taught him to hope again, to take risks in love, and to believe that family and joy were worth every challenge. Through her, he had learned that happiness is not found in solitude or comfort alone, but in connection, shared dreams, and the courage to embrace life fully. Even as the children grew and the ranch continued to demand hard work, Jacob felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The house was noisy, messy, and chaotic at times, but it was filled with love. Every hug, every laugh, every shared meal reinforced the knowledge that he was no longer alone. He had a family, a partner, and a life that was vibrant, meaningful, and complete. In quiet moments, Jacob would sometimes take a walk through the fields alone, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. He would see the places where he had once felt lonely, now transformed by life, love, and laughter. The fence lines he had walked countless times now echoed with the sounds of children chasing each other. And the barn, once a place of solitude, became a hub of activity. In these moments, he felt deep gratitude, not just for the land, but for the family that had filled it with warmth and purpose. Jacob also recognized the lessons he wanted to pass on to his children. He taught them the value of kindness, the importance of hard work, and the beauty of dreaming big. He showed them that life is full of challenges, but with love, courage, and perseverance, it can be extraordinarily rewarding. Clara's influence was equally profound. She instilled in the children confidence, creativity, and the understanding that family is built not just on presents, but on shared effort, trust, and commitment. The ranch, once a symbol of Jacob's isolation, had become a testament to life's possibilities. He understood that his story was not just about love or family, it was about transformation. One person's courage, one dream spoken aloud, and one shared vision had changed everything. Clara's bold desire for at least 5 children had seemed impossible at first, but it had reshaped Jacob's world in ways he had never anticipated. Together, they had created a life filled with joy, learning, and connection that would continue for years to come. As the sun set on the horizon, painting the fields with hues of gold and pink, Jacob stood beside Clara, watching their children play. He felt a profound sense of peace, a peace that came not from quiet solitude, but from the fullness of life, love, and family. The loneliness that had once defined him was gone, replaced by laughter, warmth, and shared dreams. He turned to Clara, a smile spreading across his face. "You were right," he said softly. "Life is better when it's shared." Clara laughed, her eyes sparkling. "And look at what we've shared. It's more than I ever dreamed possible." Jacob nodded, looking around at their bustling ranch, their children, and the life they had built together. He realized that happiness was not a fleeting moment or a distant dream. It was built every day in every choice, every act of love, and every moment of connection. And in that moment, surrounded by his family and the land that had shaped him, he understood something profound. Life is richest not in solitude, but in the courage to dream, the willingness to love, and the strength to build a life together. With Clara by his side and their children filling the house with energy and laughter, Jacob finally knew the meaning of fulfillment. His heart, once heavy with loneliness, was now full beyond measure. He had found not just love, but family, purpose, and the joy of living fully. And in the quiet moments when he could pause and reflect, he realized that life's true treasure is not wealth, land, or comfort. It is the people who make your world vibrant, the love that fills it, and the dreams that turn impossibility into reality.